Hi, everybody. This is Giannina from Mochi Mag, and I'm joined by Joseph Lamb, who is the creator of Parents Are Human, a card deck that helps you get to know your family a little bit better. We're going to be talking about family, what it's like to talk to our parents, the generational divides, and how we can overcome those kinds of things. So thank you so much for being here, Joseph.
Thanks so much for having me.
What does an Asian American family look like? Like, I think we have in our minds that, American families look like two and a half children, a mother, a father, a white picket fence. Um,
Yeah.
but, our realities, and I'm saying, you and I right now, I
Mhm.
think that they're very different, right? And I think that that's the case for many Asian American families.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And the one word I'd use to describe what Asian American families are is messy. The way I would describe it is talking to me, my parents talking to me was like walking through a landmine or a minefield where
Mhm.
anything that they said or did could have set me off. And the only reason I was like that was because I didn't know how to process my emotions. I didn't know, I didn't have the tools back then to process the pains that I was going through of being bullied at school. Um, and and yeah, as an only child growing up in the U.S., my parents immigrated from China, so I'm second gen. Yeah, they couldn't really help me with the social cues or learning the social skills of America. So I was this really lonely kid that struggled, and I hope anyone who's listening, who's also in the similar situation, will feel maybe a little not as alone, and just how messy it can be.
Yeah. And I think messy is a great word. And I think something you're describing there is the fact that, not being understood at school, not being understood at home is very difficult. And, I think it's easier for us to get mad at our family because we know that they'll always be there for us. There is that kind
Mhm.
of idea,
Oh,
but I think that, it's also easy for them to get mad at us for things that are beyond their control. I think I also very much resonate with the idea of like being bullied for who I was racially. My parents not understanding that, even I not really understanding that, it was a product of racism. I just thought it was me as a person. And, I carry that home with me. And if it was me as a person, who is the person who is in charge of raising me and like teaching me
right.
what was right and wrong? It was like my parents. And it's like, why do you do things those ways?
And what was really rough for me that I didn't realize until later on was not having that sense of safety, security at home, um,
Hmm.
where I had someone to talk to who
Yeah.
would be there unconditionally to
Hmm.
to to also understand what I was going through. And there were just so many moments where yeah, I just ended up internalizing it even further when I was
Hmm.
stressed out, instead of opening to my parents, which even till this day, having a pattern that doesn't serve me anymore, I'm trying to open up to my parents as much as I can.
Yeah. I mean, I think unconditional love in our families looks very different than what we think it should look like.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is this language divide. And it's interesting because my parents immigrated from the Philippines, and English is very well spoken over there. My parents don't have an accent, they speak English, but then, um, which is kind of unique, but not rare. But then I think one time I got into an argument with them, and specifically my mom, and she reminded me that, even though she speaks English very well, it's not her first language. It's not the
Mm,
language she spoke in her house. And she
mhm,
felt like I was weaponizing my mastery of English against her. Which is very like, it was very shocking and very eye-opening to me to be like, like I internalize this racism where I don't speak Chinese or Tagalog very well. Um,
mhm.
but the language that she was most comfortable with was not the language that I was using when I was talking to her.
Right.
And because of that, when I would like accuse her of things, she wouldn't necessarily understand what the appropriate response was.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
and I think that's something interesting as well, is like within our families, there is this language barrier that creates power hierarchies, in which cases sometimes the children have more power, because you hear the stories about,
Mm,
Asian American immigrants and their children being the translator for them in this new world,
yes, yes.
and it's very
Okay.
common, but it's a very strange power dynamic.
Mhm. And yeah, when they didn't really speak English to me, I think I just made up that they couldn't understand, and that they were somehow like less knowledgeable, or had less wisdom around some of the challenges I went through. And I
Mhm.
think only now am I uncovering that my mom is so eloquent in Chinese, and like is almost like a philosopher, and it just blew my mind, some of the conversations we've had recently, where
Mhm.
I started asking her about, more philosophical topics, and she has such a deep understanding that truly I had no idea existed until like a year ago.
Yeah.
So it's this unwinding that I'm still doing, of seeing my parents as human and as people with, more than double my life experience, because they had me
Mhm.
when they were older. um that yes, they actually understand a lot of things, and they also don't understand a lot of things, as
Yeah.
do I. So we're just playing this dance of learning how to finally get to know each other, to
Mhm.
see each other's perspectives, and uncover that, holy cow, everything actually makes sense. If I had grew up in their shoes, I would have had the same beliefs, that I would have had, pretty much the same um, habits and whatnot. And now we're meeting in the middle. About 8, 9 months in, I met my friend Candace, and this was actually my friend's idea. Candace was like, "Hey, I had this idea that I've been toying around with, of doing this bilingual connection card game, because she also had a language barrier at home,
Mhm.
and it was this, like, this is it moment of, I would never regret working on this, and we just have to make this happen."
Yeah.
So we spent the next 6 months making it, interviewing so many people, other Asian
Mhm.
Americans, picking from probably like 6 or 8 thousand different questions that we found
Wow.
across books, across the internet,
Mhm.
across just anything we could find, other card games, and then spent months translating as well until it came out. So that was how it all started.
I'm wondering, since you thought a lot about parents, what will you take with you if and what or when you decide to become a parent? What lessons will
Yeah.
you carry with you or try to uphold? I'm a parent myself. I know that sometimes I have certain standards for myself as a parent that fall
Mhm.
through some days. Um, there are days where I do yell, and I told myself I wouldn't yell.
Yeah.
That's just how being a parent is. And I think that's
Yeah.
when you're like, yeah, I am human. I'm going
Yep.
to apologize to my child,
Mhm.
even though he doesn't understand it yet, but it's a good
Yes.
practice.
Yeah.
Um, so what lessons do you think you're going to bring with you?
Yeah. What a what an amazing question, and one that, honestly, I haven't thought too much about, just lightly, and of the thoughts around that. I think what I'll take with me, and what I still already want to pass on to the next generation when talking to anyone that's a little bit younger than me, that maybe is going through this situation, um, is just never forgetting mm, to share our vulnerability and our real challenges as a human being, and
Hmm.
being transparent about that.
Yeah.
Because what one of the wishes that I have, that I don't blame my parents at all for not having given me, because they grew up in a culture where this was not ever present, is their vulnerability,
Hmm.
because they they worked so hard to survive and to push away and to work to eliminate all the things that were problems for them, that didn't even realize that the vulnerability is where we could have connected.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for your time. I am super excited to, see everything that comes from this. I think the cards are really amazing. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity to share my story, and yeah, I appreciate just how deep you were willing to go, and I'm just, these are the topics that I'm thinking most about. So yeah, appreciate you and all that you're uncovering.